Welcome to the pod and welcome to the blast furnace that is Hell, Texas. Brian Houston, Ryan Peterson. It's Bryan and Ryan. Hey, when it's 102-degree heat index, and literally 2 weeks ago we were in the 70s and it was raining every day, Hell, Texas is upon us.
And then I saw on Twitter, I was seeing tweets that ERCOT is telling people to turn down their. I'm like,
Already.
what? What you're
Already.
summer hasn't even started yet, and you're asking us to turn it down.
2 days in a row now, a heat index well over 100 degrees, and they're already panicking because God bless Texas and our great legislature. So we will move on. We won't talk about that so much. We've missed the last couple of weeks because of vacations and summertime stuff and business and things getting in the way. So got a lot to catch up on. But the biggest thing that's happened probably in the last couple of weeks is the word that came down last week that suddenly, sooner rather than later, we're not only going to have an expansion of the college football playoff, but they've got it to a 12-team race. Top four teams get a bye. 5 through 12, I guess, play against each other at their campus locations. Mm-hmm. And you got the six top-ranked conference champions and then six at-large teams that will be in the playoff. Your thoughts? Go.
Personally, I love it. I think it's what's needed to save college football in terms of popularity. Is it perfect? Probably not. But the reason I like it more than the 8 is because of the concern. And one thing I do like, it's the you had said it, it's the top six conference winners. So in theory, if you had a weak Pac-12 champion, they aren't necessarily going to get in because let's say the American Athletic Conference champion, like let's say a Central Florida had a really great year and went undefeated, they could get in over a 3-loss Pac-12 champion. So I think it keeps you're still getting conference champions in. So a conference championship does mean something, but then you're still also leaving enough at-large bids that good programs that have a chance to win it. The SEC, this could help them get multiple bids. Even more bids every year. I just think it's kind of the best of both worlds, the best compromise that you could have. Because I do think 16 is too many. And it also, the reason I do like 12 teams is the top 4, it gives them a bye. So it at least makes it the Alabamas and Clemsons, which if they're still going to be the ones up there, they're going to get a bye into that next round anyway. So it's really not even adding that many more games. So personally, I like it. I think it will be a shot in the arm for the sport. For those that say it's going to make games meaningless, I would argue back it's going to make games more meaningful because and the big thing that we have seen, Brian, in this last year, it's getting worse. Kids pulling out and not playing. This is going to keep teams in the hunt longer. It's going to make more games mean something, which in turn, more kids are going to play rather than backing out and saying, no, I'm going to just start working on the draft. So that's my perspective. Am I right? I don't know, but I would be excited. I would watch. Here's the last thing, and then I'll let you take over. I would say currently with the current bowl system, I don't care about any of the bowl games. I truly do not care. They mean nothing. I'll watch the 14 playoff, and that's it. If this system is in place, I will be watching every single playoff game, and I'll be excited to do so. And that, to me, is what college football needs.
I was and have been against the expansion since day one because to hear the teams that were whining that will never get in, my argument was get better, invest, compete, instead of whining your way in. Having said that, I do agree, though, that it's obvious that the sport, if it's going to grow, this probably needs to happen. The interesting thing, you pointed it out, if we'd have had this in place this past year, the Pac-12 would have been left out because they would have had a 2-loss Oregon team and Coastal Carolina was ranked higher than them. So it doesn't necessarily guarantee that one of the Power 5 conference champions doesn't get left out anyway. Now, it's probably remote. That's probably an outlier. It's COVID last year and all that. But it doesn't just automatically guarantee that just because you won your conference, that if you're mediocre, you're not going to get into the playoff.
Right.
I do love the idea of the first round games being on campus. The one thing that I think that's going to be a game changer for those 5 through 12 teams, because those places are going to be electric.
Oh yeah.
The fields. That's the only thing I don't like about the top 4 teams getting a bye, because then they don't get a home game, which would really be rocking.
Mm-hmm.
And their first game will be a neutral site game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in New Orleans or something like that. So it's a little weird from that standpoint. But yeah, it will keep your average fan interested. It's not going to be a situation where if you drop 2 ball games in September that your season's over and your fans have given up. And I get it. So as much as I don't like it, or I didn't like it, I do see that it's probably what's got to happen. I'm for anything that keeps players from opting out.
Right.
And so whatever you got to do to keep players, because unfortunately, the bowls that are left, you're still going to have those situations where if they're in bowl games, they're not in the playoffs, you're still going to see guys, making business decisions and pulling out of those games. And I don't like that at all. I think that's running out on your team when you do that. I get it. You don't want to get hurt. I understand, but you've been playing all year long. Finish it out.
Yeah.
So anyway, now the one thing, if people think that this is going to stop Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, LSU, whoever, if you think that's going to stop these teams from continuing to be dominant football teams, you're crazy, because this playoff will open up opportunities for people, but that does not mean the dynasties are not going to continue with the powers that be, because ultimately these kids that are getting recruited and go to these places, their main concern is, what can you do to get me into the league? Mm-hmm. And as long as Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson and Oklahoma and LSU and whoever else you want to throw in there, as long as those schools are putting 6 and 7 guys in the first round every year, they're going to continue to stay on top. I don't think when it's all said and done that you're going to see much change. I mean, I think that the national champions we've seen the last 4 or 5 years would still be the same teams. But you can't argue if you're one of the other guys that you didn't at least get a shot.
And I agree. I mean, I still think, you're going to see a lot of the same names at the top. Maybe not every single year. There may be outliers occasionally, but for the most part. But the other thing about it that I like, and it's the one thing that I have not liked about college football when you compare it to every other sport, and we saw it, and I've really enjoyed watching the women's college softball and their World Series, seeing the little guy, was it James Madison, and had the ace pitcher with the, that could never happen in football. And I realize it's a different sport, and things like that probably won't happen in football, but the problem is we don't know because they don't have any shot. And at least now, and look, if they lose, if a Coastal Carolina gets to play a big boy like Alabama, and if they lose by 50, they lose by 50, but at least they get their shot. And those kids, if they have an undefeated season and a great run, at least they can truly say that we got a chance to compete for a championship. And that's why I do like the 12 teams, because it doesn't protect like a Pac-12 or even a Big 12 champion if they're not great, that they can just get in with an automatic bid, because it's the top 6 conference champions based on ranking. But it also is going to give now these other conferences at least they're going to get one seat at the table. And in some cases, and I think this past year, I'm trying to remember, was it this past year? There would have been more than one that got a seat at the table, I think, this past year. And again, that's not going to happen every single year, because I had seen someone had gone back and done what it would have looked like the past 4 or 5 years with this in place. And there were some fun matchups and games that we would never see otherwise. And, again, ultimately, yes, it still may end up being Alabama every time, or LSU, or an Ohio State. But to me, it's going to be fun to have some other teams in the playoff with the chance. I mean, at least giving them a puncher's shot to at least try to make a moment. That I watch sports because I want to see the upset. I want to see the unexpected. I want to see the thing I never thought could happen. And now with this, there's a better chance of something like that happening.
Well, and you saw yesterday, I've been watching, I did not watch the NBA playoffs. Mavericks are out. I don't care.
Yeah.
But watching the College World Series, you saw, for instance, an LSU team that did not have a really good season, but managed to get into the playoffs and got into a super regional before they got crushed by a really good Tennessee team. You saw the number 1 team in the nation in Arkansas get eliminated. They're not even going to the World Series.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things, DBU being in the tournament, we've seen the little guys in baseball get in there and make a run. And, ultimately you're still going to have I fully expect Vanderbilt to win this thing because they got the 2 best starting pitchers in the country. But you're right. It does open up the opportunity for somebody to pull an upset. And I realize this is not a 3-game series thing we're talking about with playoffs and football, but you see what happens when that situation does come up. Anything can happen. So yes, I do think it's going to help the teams, particularly on the West Coast, where it's hard enough to get them interested in anything anyway, dude. But I do think it will help. I still think that the powers are going to be the powers, but it is what it is. It looks like it'll start in 2023. I think we'll see how it all plays out. But one thing about it, man, it's going to be a money grab for whoever gets the rights. If ESPN and Disney, they'll roll out billions to keep this.
Yeah, and I don't know if you saw, because I had my doubts that this will ever actually go through. And then when I saw how much money the conferences are going to get, it's going through. Hey, because you're talking billions of dollars, not millions, billions of dollars.
And let me assure you, if you think that the people making those decisions are doing this for the best interest of the fans and the players, you're insane. Right. They're doing it for this. And
but as a fan, I don't care because I'm excited about it. But yeah, the payout that the Power 5 conferences are going to get is insane. Because even in the group of 6 conferences, they're going to be fine with it. They're getting much less. They'll get much less of the pie, but they're at least going to have a chance at the table to compete. But yeah, the Power, and that's, one of the ways that they're getting the Power 5 teams to go in on this is one. And I had read that was a big part of the negotiation was there were concerns about, well, we're not going to have as many at-large chances now if automatic qualifiers are going to conference champions. But that's why 12 was kind of the happy medium. Well, we're going to have 6 at-large bids. It made Notre Dame happy. They're the one. I mean, I just wish they'd have to join a conference.
Well, this will, because they will never automatically be one of the top 4 teams because the top 4 team has to be a conference champion. So if anything, number one, it's amazing Notre Dame gave into that, but they know how much money's on the table. And what year are they not going to be in the playoff under this circumstance? So it's going to be a very rare situation that they don't get in there. And they're certainly going to have an opportunity to host a home game, which means a ton of revenue.
So, and I think that's the key, because if they've had a really good year, if they're not a top 4 seed, they're still going to be a high seed and get a home game. And what you just said, that is going to be amped up, an amazing atmosphere. They're going to have a huge gate. They're going to make a ton of money, have an amazing atmosphere. So I think that's how you sell it. Yes, you don't get a bye, but you're getting a playoff home game, and you're going to generate a bunch more revenue just off of that.
And one last thing, whoever the idiot was, I heard this said, whoever the idiot was that suggested that the national championship be held every year at the Rose Bowl, to hell with the Rose Bowl. They think they own college football to begin with. I'd like to see them moved right out of the rotation because everything is rotated around making sure they get that 3:30 window on New Year's Day. And they have been more of an obstacle in all of these things than any other bowl game. And I'm going, Granddaddy, you need to die. Okay.
And the sad thing about the Rose Bowl, it's become a game I don't even care about most of the time. I mean, very rarely is it two teams that, you're really excited to watch. So, yeah, and I do wonder how is this going to affect the bowls, because that was one thing, and I don't know if you did see, are so the playoff games are not going to be bowl games, like the 5 against 12. Would that be a bowl game technically, or no?
Yes, they would still be bowl games, and they'd still be played at bowl game sites. And I'm sure they would continue the rotation for the championship game amongst the 4 or 5 stadiums that are in the play for it every year, is my understanding. Okay. So, but we'll see. Just one other comment about College World Series. Everything that I hate about Major League Baseball is what I love about college baseball. They're still out there putting the ball in play. We're not looking at launch angles. We're not looking at spin rate. These kids are still out there playing the game I grew up watching, and it's still a pleasure to watch the College World Series in college baseball. The fans are into it. The atmosphere is electric. The baseball itself is exciting to watch. It's not just strikeouts and home runs. It's just everything. It just magnifies everything I dislike about Major League Baseball now. And so it was really enjoyable to watch these college kids playing baseball games and seeing guys making great defensive plays. And, just it was just fun. Good pitching, but batters getting an advantage sometimes against a good pitcher, beating a good pitcher once in a while. It's just fun. It's fun to watch.
And the only other thing I'll add, not only college baseball, I've personally enjoyed watching college softball better than Major League Baseball. So, I mean, both college games I've thought have been more exciting. There's stuff actually going on. The crowds are great and into it. Yeah, I've enjoyed watching both.
Moving to the NBA, we have not talked since the Mavericks were eliminated. They had a 2-0 lead. They had almost a 30-point lead in Game 3 and ended up getting smoked in the first round by the Clippers. The first takeaway that I have from that is that entire roster is a dumpster fire except for Luka. There's not one guy on the Mavericks team that could have started on the Clippers team except Luka. You have some good players, but they're 15-minute-a-game players, all of them. You can't count on a single one of them to come out on a night-to-night basis and give you 20 points, 10 rebounds. That to me was exposed, and Kristaps Porzingis, I don't know what's wrong. I don't know why, but that MIA for the whole playoffs, he was a non-factor. And it got to the point where Carlisle just said, we can't spend time trying to get you going in this playoff anymore. He sent him over in a corner just so he'll draw a defender out to space things out. But guy was averaging less than 10 points a game. 7'3", and he's just invisible. I don't think that's going to work. I don't know what they're going to do with him. I don't know who would trade for him.
Well, and the narrative, it was weird because the narrative was, when they were up in the series, when they were up 2-0, the narrative was, well, he's sacrificing for the betterment of the team, acting as a decoy in the corner. And I'm thinking,
that's
you don't pay a guy $30+ million that's supposed to be the number 2, that kind of money to be a decoy in the corner. And then obviously when they really needed him, as the Clippers were getting going, and the big crazy thing about Porzingis, he's very talented, obviously physically gifted, but he just settles for jump shots. He's 7 and he won't go in the lane. He's settling for jump shots and he misses them. And then, you hear that then it went from he was just sacrificing for the betterment of the team to like he's not happy with his role, and like that's not the case, and that he wants to be a part of the offense. But the reality is, you watch him play, he's not. I don't know how Carlisle's supposed to trust him. And the problem with this Mavericks team, and look, I don't blame them for making a move, because again, they can never get the big name free agent that they want to sign there. So you got to work a trade and figure out what you can get. But in the NBA, we've seen you have to have 2-star players if you're going to make any kind of legit run. And Porzingis isn't even a number 2. He's a borderline maybe number 3. And their number 2 really was probably Tim Hardaway. And Tim Hardaway's not a number 2. Tim Hardaway should be a number 3 or 4. So Luka truly, I think Luka took some heat that he wasn't trusting his teammates enough. But it gets to the point, who is he supposed to trust? Like, what is he supposed to do?
When nobody else is knocking down shots.
Right.
What you said is true. What are you supposed to do? He's the best player on the floor. But you could tell in so many of those ball games, he would have a huge first half. He would be gassed in the third quarter, and then maybe make a little bit of a comeback, maybe get his wind and finish a little bit in the fourth. But he was exhausted.
Yeah.
And having to do everything alone. And because nobody else was doing anything, he was having to play more minutes even, because Carlisle would usually, back in the regular season, try to get him out a couple of minutes before the first quarter was done, try to give him some rest. Well, he's playing 45 minutes in most of these games during the playoffs. And it was frustrating because they got off to such a great start in game 3, and it looked like they were getting ready to take control of the thing. The second thing that was frustrating is how you could have 16,000 or plus fans at the AAC and not have that make some kind of a difference. That was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And also you found out what an assassin Kawhi is, but you also found out they're beatable.
Well, and I think, this is going to hurt the Mavericks for a long time when you just sit back and think all they had to do was win one home game, just one, and they couldn't do it.
No.
So yeah, it's a tough one. And look, and I know that I had heard, and Cuban immediately came out in support of Carlisle, and they are not going to make a change. But to me, it's not the coach that needs to be changed. This roster is simply not good enough.
No.
And there's going to have to be some drastic changes. What are they going to be able to do? I'm not sure. You mentioned, what do you do with Porzingis? I know they were kind of talking him up, and the reason they're doing that is they're trying to up his trade value, because they need someone to want to take on that contract. But it may be actually one of those instances where maybe a change of scenery would help Porzingis get back to the level he can play. Maybe he can be the lead guy somewhere else for a bad team, and the Mavericks can get someone else that needs to change of scenery as well. But they're going to have to do something, because in the Western Conference, what they have currently is just not good enough to actually compete to win it.
The only thing and we'll move off of this because I do have a bigger Maverick story that came out today. But the main thing I'm concerned about, you talked about it earlier, he was settling for jumpers in the playoffs. And I'm just wondering how much these knee injuries are in his head, because he's not going to the basket. He's not hitting the boards. That was one of the things. He was going to be a 20 and 10 guy, and it's just not happening. And I'm just wondering, A, if he's physically able to do it, or B, if he's just right now, those injuries are in his head and he's trying every way in the world to stay healthy. So that means he doesn't want to get inside and mix it up. But unfortunately, that's the player they've got to have to balance out, the pressure that Luka's going to have put on him. So that's got to change. The thing that concerns me is the article that came out today in The Athletic made a big splash about tension in the front office with the Mavericks. One of the criticisms that Carlisle got during the playoffs was the strange rotations, the weird starting lineups, why, different guys were in ball games where they'd only been getting 8 minutes a game in the regular season and were suddenly in key places in the ball game, guys deep bench that were on the court. And the report focuses on Haralabos Voulgaris, who is the Mavericks director of quantitative research and development. The guy is a prominent sports gambler, so that ought to work out well for you, letting that guy run your team. But apparently he was hired in 2018. He's apparently an extremely smart guy. He's also an extreme smart ass based on what I'm reading about him. He's a guy that's very different. He's more than ready to tell you he's always right, which is a problem because Rick Carlisle is a guy that's always willing to tell you that he's always right. So there's got to be a clash there. But a couple of things that bug me about this is that the report says he literally was making out starting lineups and rotations. And I'm having a hard time imagining Rick Carlisle would even buy that, would even allow that. Secondly, he's got a huge voice when it comes to trades, free agency signings, and all of those things. So if that's true and he's got that big a voice and we're talking about a trash roster, what does that say? And then the biggest concern is that he's already managed to piss off Luka. He's gotten one time Luka was on the floor and had missed a shot, and he could see Voulgaris sitting across the way from the bench, and he's giving him one of these like calm down. And because there are no fans in the gym, you can hear Lucas saying, "Shut the F up." Who are you? Who is this guy? So this is not good if this guy's got a major role and suddenly he's got the dominant voice in the organization, and you're looking at trying to sign Luka to a max contract extension next year. If you want to keep him, it would seem like you want to do everything you can to make sure you don't tick him off.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't read the article. I just don't believe that Rick Carlisle is letting someone else pick his lineups. Is this guy an analytical guy and he's just, using his input to help? Maybe I don't know that I would buy, not to say it's not true, but I have a hard time believing Carlisle would allow that. The bigger concern is if Luka is butting heads with him and doesn't like him. Because I would think ultimately you're going to choose Luka, I would hope.
Yeah.
I guess, the moment that Luka says, get him out of here, I would assume that they'll get him out of there, because the big thing right now is, they're going to need to make sure he signs his max contract, doesn't want to go anywhere, which I have a hard time believing Luka would want to turn down the amount of money that he would get from the Mavericks. But that's not an encouraging thing to hear. I always get nervous when people like that. We've seen it with the Texans, the Houston Texans, the same kind of thing. And, before all these lawsuits against Deshaun Watson came out, several players on that team can't stand this one guy that comes in, really doesn't know anything about football, and he's dictating decisions. So teams got to be very careful about bringing in some outside person like this, and when they're not qualified to be handling it, and then you start ticking off your best players and it turns into a train wreck.
Yeah, the only thing that strikes me about this is that because Carlisle hasn't won a playoff series since they won the championship 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So if he doesn't want to leave Dallas and he wants to be the coach, and Cubans told him to listen to this guy, that may be the situation. I just think that Carlisle is such a strong personality, but they haven't had a lot of success in the last 10 years. I mean,
but
that's not on him, because a lot of that was rebuilding the team, and we want to talk about trash rosters before Luka and Porzingis. That was a trip to the desert, man.
I mean, and that's the thing. That's why I don't think it's Carlisle's fault, because they have not had good rosters. Pre-Luka, I mean, it was bad. And the West is loaded. Like, it's one thing if they're in the Eastern Conference, because you can be a mediocre average team and make the playoffs every year in the East and maybe even win a playoff series. In the West, you have to be elite. there is not an easy night in the West. And with some of the rosters that he has, it just wasn't good enough. And the other thing too, if Rick Carlisle got let go tomorrow, he would have a job within 24 hours.
Doubt.
And there would be a contender that wants him, and he'd probably have a better roster tomorrow than he does today. So again, like you just said, his personality is so strong. He's well respected in the league. I just have a hard time believing he would be okay with that. I think Carlisle would before he ever agreed to that would be like, just let me go. I'm going to go get another job. It's time to move on. I've been here a long time.
That's kind of what I was thinking. Last thing, and then I'm going to let you go. I did mention it's a 10-year anniversary this weekend of the Mavericks winning their title. That was also the last time that we have had an NBA championship team that wasn't a best team that money could buy team, a team that was put together by free agency, if you know what I mean. Golden State bringing in KD, and the Celtics the year that they had,
Garnett and Ray Allen.
Ray Allen and all those guys. The every team LeBron ever played on, has always been kind of put together, schemed by LeBron, and manipulating the free agent market to get those teams together. To me, that was the last pure basketball team to win an NBA championship, which makes it even more special to me because it was Dirk surrounded by a whole bunch of role players who knew their roles and did what they were supposed to do, and they were well coached. And they beat one of the best teams that money could buy in that Miami Heat team that was put together, by money whipping everybody.
Yeah. The only pushback I'll give, I still give credit to Golden State for winning their first one. Agreed. Because their first team pre-Kevin Durant, that was all draft built. Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, Steph Curry were all draft guys. Right. And they just hit home runs. But then after they lost the next year to LeBron, then they ended up buying Durant and becoming, an unstoppable force. And that's why actually this year it's fun to see the teams left. Although, the funny thing is the Clippers are one of those teams that we're talking about trying to buy a championship, but the Clippers have never even been to a conference final. So the teams left right now are all teams that have not been there. So we're going to have some new blood in the finals, and it should make it a little more enjoyable. Because I know the Lakers and the Celtics and, all these legacy, the royalty of NBA, but I get tired of teams just being able to buy championships, and I like seeing teams have to build it, and I appreciate that a lot more.
Amen. And the interesting thing about it, the team that the biggest team that money could buy right now in Brooklyn is in major trouble because now 2 of the 3 money whipped guys are hurt, and you don't know if either one of them, Kyrie or Harden, is going to be available the rest of the way with the Bucks, who looked great at home over the weekend.
And now if they've gone from being down 2-0 to now it's 2-2, it's a best out of 3. And like you said, Kyrie and Harden are out. I don't think either one will be back in the series. Durant's going to have to carry that team if Brooklyn's going to go.
I agree. All right, man. Anything else before we let you go?
No, it's been fun though, having all this stuff to talk about. I was thinking about this time last summer, like we were itching to get games. So it's been fun to have all this going on.
Yes, sir. It is good to talk to you too. And we'll be talking to you next week. Try to stay cool.
Yes.
Sit in a bathtub full of ice if you get a chance. And if you do get a chance, please subscribe to the YouTube channel and leave nice comments and tell your friends about how great this podcast is, because we're down to like 3 viewers. So we want to build on that, right? Yes. We want to grow the sport. We need to expand the playoff. All right, Ryan, have a great one.
You too, bud.
All right, I'm Brian Houston. That's Ryan Peterson. Bryan and Ryan. See you next time.